Hey guys, it's Mr. Calderon again with Queen My Pawn. I'm going to be analyzing the second game I played. That it was a Queen's Gambit, just like the Netflix series. So let's get right into it. I was white, and obviously the Queen Gambit starts with d4 and normally continues with d5, followed by c4. So basically d4, d5, c4, and then they take the pawn. That's the Queen's Gambit because you can't take the pawn right away. I mean, of course, you can do that and then that, but that's not the point. The point is that usually in the Queen's Gambit like this, you have more control of e4. Now, that's not what they played though, and we're going to be discussing the Queen's Gambit declined. So the Queen's Gambit declined. This is actually an Indian defense because it's more flexible and needs to like the King's Indian defense with g6 and bishop g7, but that's not what they played. We actually ended up transpositioning into the Queen's Gambit, so it's gonna be all right. c4, e6, knight c3. And here there is one more chance to transposition out of the Queen's Gambit by playing bishop 3-4, which is the Nimzo Indian defense, at which point I would recommend f3. So they played d5, and now we're back on the main line. Bishop g5, bishop e7, knight f3, h6, bishop to h4, castles. Everything has been normal so far. e3, and now there are three different ways of continuing, one of which is not the game move, knight to h7. Yes, my opponent really played this. But let me talk about some of the alternatives. b6 is my preferred variation because you get to develop the bishop and your castle and you're safe, and it becomes a dynamic hypermodern game where you try to stop the pawns over here. Then you have knight bd7, which is the orthodox or normal way of continuing. And then you have c6, which is this, not that, sorry, c6, the semi-Slav way of continuing. They're all sound, and basically, if you want to play more dynamic, you play b6. If you want to play more solid, you play knight bd7, followed by c5. And if you want to launch a queen type pawn from, you play c6. But yeah, knight to h7 just loses a pawn. Bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, c takes d5, and this is really ridiculous because my opponent just moved his knight back and forth for no reason, losing lots of time. That makes no sense. So I just take the free pawn, and now that I've won a free pawn, all I am focused on is just developing. Okay, I mean, I don't need any more pawns, so bishop to d3, a very normal move. Rook to d8, h3. Of course, castling is also an alternative, but there is a threat of bishop g4, and I don't want that bishop on that diagonal. So I need to prevent that. So queen to b4. Now, he's already moved this piece twice in the opening. It's a waste of time. I simply defend b2 with queen to e2, knight to d5. That doesn't make sense either. I just play rook to c1, which is another typical move that you play in the Queen's Gambit declined, or even accepted, which happens to look like in this case. But even if it was declined, you still play it. It looks like black is trying too hard to attack. Knight to c6, and this is dubious because, again, c5 and knight to c6 was better. Let me show you an example. We'll return over here to when black played bishop queen to b4. He should have instead played c5, queen to e2, and knight c6, or even knight to d7. All right, so knight c6. I castle finally. He takes on c3. I take back on c3. Queen to, I take back on c3 with the pawn, and queen to a5. Now this attack makes no sense because the pawn is easily defended. Try to find the best way to defend this pawn by pausing the video and trying it out for yourself. Okay, so actually I don't defend the pawn here, but I set a trap, e4. So this isn't really a threat. to take, because first of all, if bishop takes, then I have the skewer rook to a1. So that's not going to work. Actually, this isn't a skewer, it's a pin, sorry. Because if the bishop moves, I take the queen, which is more valuable. The skewer is if the queen moves, I just take the bishop. Okay. So he plays queen takes a2, which is obviously a blunder. But this brings up the point that if your opponent allows you to play what you want, you should look for traps. He should have looked for the trap of rook to c2, followed by after queen to a4, d5. And now my opponent says Merry Christmas. I take it with the pawn. My opponent says Happy New Year's. I take the bishop on d5 with the pawn because he took the pawn with the bishop. Then he takes with the rook, and now I say, he tells me happy birthday, queen to e4. And now white wins. It's obvious that developing the bishop to d3 followed by the queen to e2 so that it goes to e4 is the clear way of developing in the queen's gambit. Accepted or not accepted, you need to play bishop to d3 and queen to e2. You need to keep the bishop on this important diagonal. So rook a to d8, and now queen to h7, king to f8, and now not letting the king escape, I play rook to c7, and black resigns. An interesting line follows, and if you should try to find the checkmate after queen to d7. So queen to d7. I'm going to give the first couple of moves rook to e1, obviously. Then he plays something like, he cannot take the rook, obviously, so he plays something like f5. And now rook takes, and now you could try to find the checkmate here. It's an interesting checkmate. You should pause the video now. All right. Before I mention this checkmate, you should find out why he didn't take here first. And that's because, well, I do a dovetail sort of looking mate, or even swallowtail. So queen to h8, king to f7, queen to e8. It's almost a dovetail mate if there had been a pawn here. Queen to f8, but now this is a swallowtail mate. Actually, the king should be on the queen's square and vice versa for it to be a swallowtail mate. But this is an interesting looking type of checkmate. Almost a swallowtail, but not quite. So rook 5 takes d7, and now bishop to c4. That is the key move, because you can't let the king escape to f7. So when the rook goes back to block, now you take the rook, he takes back, and now it is safe to let the king escape to f7 because there's no rook to take you on e8. And then you do the same swallowtail looking like mate. And yeah, the knight's protecting that escape square. So that's basically it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to click the like button, give it a thumbs up, comment on the video if you have any questions, subscribe. And I really enjoyed this analysis. I will see you on the next one.